right now is there's a lot of things that the Department of Government Efficiency is uncovering as wasteful spending. Wasteful spending. It's wasting the tax dollars that's taken out of your and my pocket by our government. But what's happening? Every time they find something to cut, it gets challenged in court and struck down. Why? Because there's a process to that. Because Congress controls the purse strings. And if you haven't recognized, Congress just passed a continuing resolution to continue the same spending all the way through September. And it wasn't like Trump opposed that action. Trump supported that action and chastised the one member of Congress in the Republican Party, Thomas Massie, who stood against that. Who said, no, my constituents elected me to reduce government, not to continue this spending madness. And by the way, I warned everybody that this was going to happen, that we were going to continue these continuing resolutions. And what did our president do but attack him? And so the truth is we're going to have to continue to fight for government efficiency. It's not just going to come out of DOJ, and it's not just going to come out of the White House, but we have to fight Congress to reduce spending because they control the purse strings. And we have to put the pressure on them. And so it's great when Donald Trump says, we found $8 million for this play on DEI in Ecuador, or we found $15 million to research how salmon spawn in Washington State, or whatever. The same Festivus list that Rand Paul throws out every year. That spending is known. We also know how to end it. You do it with the Congress. You cannot do it alone. But there are things that the president is doing with his unilateral power. If you heard about the protester at Columbia being taken off because of things he said, not for any crime he committed, but for the things he said that the administration doesn't agree with, where did Trump get that power? Where did our government feel like it was entitled to be able to snatch people off the streets, throw them into a van, and put them on a plane to a prison in El Salvador? Where did that come from? I'll tell you where it came from. The same authority we gave Obama when we passed the NDAAs, the same authority we gave to George W. Bush when we passed the Patriot Act and the other restrictions on freedom in the wake of 9/11. The same restrictions on freedom that Joe Biden was empowered with. Well, now you're seeing Donald Trump utilizing it against his opponents in a way that's real and visceral. So what do we do? What do we do when we see a government like that abusing us? We have to play them against each other. Now, the political pendulum swings quite often in this country based on our duopoly. We swing from red to blue, Democrat to Republican. And what's the most common occurrence when a new president gets in power, even if he has his own party in power in Congress? In 2 years, the pendulum swings the other way. So there's a very real opportunity that in the next midterm election, we're going to have Democrats in charge of the Congress and a Republican president. Now, I'm one for divided government because normally that means nothing gets done, nothing huge changes. But there's another reason why I'm kind of wanting this, because we need to start telling our Democrat friends out there, and I'm sure we have some of them, right? We can't only hang out with libertarians, because if we did, we'd have a very, very limited social life. So I'm sure we know some Democrats out there. What we need to be hammering into the idea of every Democrat right now is you need to tell the people who are running for office that they need to run on ending presidential abuses. Let's limit presidential power. Let's pass a bill that takes away these powers away from the White House. Let's take away the imperial presidency from Donald Trump. And that will inspire many Democrats. And I'm not just doing this because I don't like Donald Trump and the things he's doing. It's because I probably am not going to like the next Democrat who gets elected and the things he or she does too. So we need to convince those who are out of power now, who are likely to be in power in 2 years in the Congress, that the first thing they need to do is take power out of the hands of the White House and return it back to the legislature where it does belong, where the constitutional responsibility is, to be representatives of the people. Why? Because I trust, as corrupt as Congress can be, that there are some people like Thomas Massie who are more considerate to the needs of their constituents than the powers that be in Washington, D.C. And you can see that in Thomas Massie when you see the amount of money that gets thrown against him in the primaries to try to toss him out. And you can bet in 2026, some of that money is going to be coming from the MAGA sphere, because he dared to vote against this continuing resolution. Let's fight back. and let's be smart about it. As libertarians, we need to be an extremely distinct political party. We are not the junior league for the Republicans. We are not the junior league for the Democrats. We are a principled voice of conscience in the political sphere. And we need to remember our responsibility there. And so yes, I'm going to fight for all the things I agree with that Donald Trump is doing. I'm glad Ross Ulbricht is free. I'm happy that he passed an executive order opposing the implementation of CBDCs. I'm supporting the dismantling of the Department of Education. I'm supporting a lot of the things that he does that I think are great. Just like I did when anybody else is president. But our job as libertarians is to be the thorn in the side of the state. It doesn't matter which party inhabits the White House. We need to be holding them to the principles of freedom. We need to be holding them to account for the abuses they are doing to our people, and we need to not be silent about it. I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat that's abusing our freedom. There is someone abusing our freedom, and they live at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and there's 435 other ones that live at, or that work at the other end of the Capitol. So what can we do? What can we do? Well, I'll tell you what I've learned as I've traveled the country. I've spoken to thousands and thousands of individuals about their needs and their concerns. This is something that Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris are unable to do. Because of who they are, they can't really interact with people on a one-on-one basis, unless it's some sort of trite, pre-recorded, pre-staged, let's screen these people for our photo op. I, on the other hand, got to travel across the country, sit in hotel bars, airplane, air terminals, restaurants, and just talk to people. Hi, my name's Chase. I'm running for President of the United States. What matters to you? I can tell you I gained a lot of feedback. What matters most to people, not surprisingly, is their family and their community and what they see happening around them. That's a pretty universal constant, no matter what their focus is or no matter what their main policy is that they run on. They want to see freedom for themselves, their family, and their community to live in peace. It's just how we get those things that might be different. And I think that's the biggest communicator. Libertarians have an image issue. We do. And I can tell you this is somebody who traveled around with the word libertarian basically plastered on my, like a scarlet L as I traveled around. I heard every bad thing people have to say about libertarians. And you know what? Some of those things aren't entirely untrue, the way we communicate ourselves. The biggest negative I heard about us, and Pat's doing his thing with the mutual aid org to try to fight against this in his own way, but that we're selfish, that we are selfish. Many people feel like libertarians only care about themselves and their right, and my right to own a gun, my right to smoke cannabis, my right to do this. And we need to change that to all of our right. It's your right to live free. I'm not fighting for my right to live free. I'm already living as free as I'm going to, and until the government catches me, I'm going to live as free as I want to, right? But I'm fighting for your right to live free. That's what we need to communicate better outward, that we're not selfish, that we're fighting for rights that are universal and inherent to each and every person just based on their existence in this world. The other thing I think we need to be better about communicating is the solution. We talk about the problem an awful lot. We talk about the problem of the welfare programs. They take money out of our pocket. They make the decisions for us. It's an inefficient way to help people. But what we don't talk about is what we do afterwards. And so I talked a lot about what the day after looks like. If we end welfare, what does the next day look like? Well, I talk about how we can build up mutual aid organizations and charity organizations and create the places that can fill in the gaps that we see being needed in our communities. With healthcare, I want poor people to have healthcare. I want poor people to have security. I want poor people to have food. I just know that our centrally planned government is a frankly shitty way to get that to people. It doesn't work. Not the way we want it to, and certainly not dollar for dollar the way it's valued. And so, in addition to just talking about the problems that we face, we must also talk about the solutions. Now, when I talked about being anti-war, one of the first things people would say about me is, well, you're just an isolationist. You just want to disengage from the world. You can't do that. We're America. We're the leaders of the free world. You can't do that. And I say, yeah, you can. You can end wars and still be the leader of the free world. It's called being the leader of free trade, tearing down trade barriers around the world. Instead of trading bombs and bullets, let's trade Coca-Cola and Wrangler jeans. Let's export those values instead of the values of violence around the world. Let's create some goodwill as opposed to fear. That's how you lead the free world without leading the world into war everywhere. That's the kind of message that we have to put forward as libertarians, is that we don't just oppose war, but we support camaraderie amongst people, whether they live here or abroad. We support free trade for businesses, whether they exist in the United States or China or Russia or Iran or North Korea or anywhere else where we feel like we have adversaries. And that's the third point that I really learned along the road, is that we also have to stop demonizing entire populations based on what their government does. Because think about this. If we demonize and we say, Israel is doing this, Iran is doing this, the Palestinians are doing this, what we need to remember is it's not every individual. It's the government that represents those people. And we, as Americans, most of all, should know this lesson. Because if we are going to tar and feather individuals with the crimes and horrors of their government, well, by all means, we need to be the first ones tarred and feathered, because our government does great evil around the world. Make no mistake. There's a lot of good things people do around the world, but there's a lot of evil that's done in our name. And so when we talk about criticizing the war machine, I always am quick to say, I will criticize the Netanyahu administration, the Israeli government. Why? Because not every Israeli agrees with the Netanyahu administration or the Israeli government. There are peaceful people in Israel who want peace, and they don't support the way their government's doing. The same as I would say about the Palestinians. Hamas is evil. Hamas commits violence. Palestinians, for the most part, want to live in peace. Even if they've been conditioned to violence, because that's the way they've been raised. Even if they've been conditioned to hate their fellow man, that is not a permanent condition. That can be undone. Peace is a real thing. But it starts when we stop demonizing people and we save our ire for their government. And that's why I will never hate Americans. I love Americans. I've been to all 50 states. I've gotten to experience the culture of America, the kindness of America, the amazing potential of America. And you know what? It makes me damn proud to be an American, even if I feel like my government is not something I should be very proud of on a regular basis. And so I'm a patriot. That's what I am. I'm fighting for my right to live free, because the ideals that are put forward, however imperfect they are executed, are good ones. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, these things. And I will keep fighting for them, whether I'm on a ballot as a candidate for president, or if I'm just a regular guy from Atlanta, Georgia, who's doing my part as a part of the Libertarian Party of Georgia, which is what I'm doing now. I've been elected to my state's executive committee. Some of you in this room have been elected to your state's leadership here in New Jersey. First thing I want to say to you, in addition to congratulations, is thank you. Thank you for doing the work of your party. It's needed. And it's something that I'm going to focus myself on at home for the next couple of years. Improving the Libertarian Party in my state, so that when we have candidates run again in the future, whether it's for Senate, governor, for president in 4 years, whenever we run candidates, we want to improve our image as libertarians. And so as you start this next term, as you end your convention here in New Jersey, those of you who have been elected to the leadership of your state, take that responsibility and hold it, and understand that it is a real responsibility. You represent now something more than just yourself. And this is one of the biggest things that I think we need to learn as Libertarian Party affiliates. When you put the name Libertarian Party of whatever, you're not representing just yourself anymore. And I think we need to mature our communications and recognize that we need to stop seeing something that I don't see here in New Jersey, maybe not as much as some other states, obviously, but I'm sick and tired of seeing Libertarian Party affiliates fighting with one another online. I'm tired of seeing us attacking people as not real libertarians. Justin Amash said something in Reno in 2022 that made a hell of a lot of sense to me. He was looking at a very, very divided room. And he said, if anybody in this room is not libertarian enough to be libertarian, we're in real trouble. Because you guys are the people who took the time to come to a convention center and be a part of this, right? We need to be coming together as a party. And Georgia was no different. Georgia was a state that was taken over during the takeover year of 2022, led to strife, led to division. And where are we at now? Well, we're a divided party, which I think is a good thing. We have, the traditional fighting lines the last couple of years. It's faded. It's changed over time. It used to be radicals versus pragmatics. Before then, there were fights that was before my time in the Libertarian Party. But the most recent one is apparently the dividing line of Mises versus non-Mises. And I'm here to tell you that in the state of Georgia, we have a blended executive committee. We have a Mises caucus chair, but the majority of the board that he serves are non-Mises. And so now what do we get to do here? Well, we can either continue to divide ourselves and continue fighting in the state of Georgia, which I'm sure will make for some great threads on X, and will really make us feel like big, strong men. Ooh, we owned that guy. Or we can get to work and get shit done. That used to be what we called ourselves in the Libertarian Party of Georgia. We said we were the get shit done caucus. We didn't care about where you came from. We didn't care about your background or how you got here. You fight for freedom? Good. Let's get some shit done. And so that is my ask of each and every one of you here at the Libertarian Party of New Jersey. When you see injustices, as you were talking about at a town meeting, or at a school board meeting, or in any other government meeting, when you see those injustices, speak up about it. Don't be silent. Start attending your local meetings. Nothing is more powerful than someone standing up for a couple of minutes, talking down their elected officials in a professional yet, let's say, pointed manner, and then saying, by the way, if you agree with everything that I just said and you think what they're saying is terrible, meet me in the back of the room. I'm with the Libertarian Party of New Jersey. I want to get you involved. That's how you grow. That's how you survive. That's how you thrive. And that's how you fight for a more free world. I'm going to continue doing that in my home in Georgia. But as a former candidate for president, I'm going to continue traveling around the country and hoping to inspire you and get you up and ready to fight and get some shit done. And that being said, I want to thank you, each and every one of you, for having me out here, and I will answer any questions you have for the next little bit. But I always end my speeches the same way if you've ever seen me speak. To each and every one of you here, and to everyone you know and love, and even those you don't, I wish a life of peace, love, and liberty. Thank you. Now, I'm happy to take questions about the actual, the running for president. If you have any questions about the campaign trail, any of that stuff, I'm an open book. Please ask.
I know two things that you said when I've met with you throughout your campaign. One, we do a good job talking to each other, not a good enough job talking to members of the public,
trail,
which is something you've emphasized previously. What are some maybe obvious things that people are missing? Like, how do we get more libertarians to touch grass, so to speak? I feel like that's a big missing element.
Yeah, it's a great question. How do we get more libertarians to touch grass? Well, first off, get offline. Social media is important. It's a tool, but it's a tool. It's an ends to it's a means to an end. It's not the whole thing. If you're not actually out talking to individuals, you're not really going to learn a lot about what the average person who's not a libertarian is going through. I think the greatest exercise in education for me of talking to regular folks is when I did 4 days on the ground at the Iowa State Fair. 100,000+ people come through those fairgrounds every day. The majority of them are not libertarians. But I was there 4 days on the ground, and I probably spoke to 1,000 people. Even if it was just a quick, hi, I'm running for president, thank you, or if it was a more in-depth conversation. The first thing you have to figure out if you want to bring more people into libertarianism and communicate well with them is find out what's important to them. And the thing anytime someone with a stroller walked by, the first thing I said is You have a lovely family. Can I ask you a question about education? Don't you think you should have more control over education than some bureaucrat in DC who doesn't know your kid? Every one of them say yeah. Well, 99% of them say yeah. There's a few who are like, I really love the Department of Education. I don't know how to raise my kids. But by and large, most people are like, yeah, I want to make those decisions. You've gotten an entryway into liberty. But what can we get to the libertarians to stop feeling like so distinct from other people, to be able to have a conversation that isn't just like, I'm a libertarian, taxation is theft, right? You got to ease people into that shit. You can't just scare people. And it is something that I think we do need to do a better job of communicating. I think one of the things you can do is join the Toastmasters. If you are scared about public speaking, they will put you through a crash course on how to do that. Also, practice does make perfect. When I did debates, I practiced my opening statements and my closing statements in front of a mirror with 3 brightest ring light settings that I could. Why? Because I knew if I'm going to be on a debate stage that's being televised, there will be bright television lights on me, and I don't want to be squinting the whole time. So I need to practice to keep my eyes open in bright lights, even how much it hurts and sucks, and you can't see anything after a minute. But it looks good on camera. And so there's definite things we can do to learn how to communicate better. One of them being, if you feel like you're not a great communicator, just start going to a bar and talking to people. I am LGBTQ. I'm young enough to still be of the generation, or old enough rather, to be of the generation that still went out to bars to meet people to get on a date. And so I've gotten pretty well acquainted to just being able to sit down to somebody and saying, hey, my name's Chase, what's your story? And if you can't get that comfortable doing it, you need to get in practice of doing it if you're going to run for office, because you need to be able to talk to anybody about anything. And trust me, there were times when I was talking to people and I was like, oh, they're not going to like the answer I'm about to give, but I got to give it anyway. But I better do it with a smile on my face and be respectful of the fact that they came and took the time to ask me that question. Because if I'm dismissive or rude, it doesn't even matter what my answer is, they're not going to like me. But the short answer to your question is get out and meet people and get offline and be involved in things that aren't just libertarian. I swear, I love libertarians. I'm not trying to tell you to not be involved in the Libertarian Party, but if there's a church group or a civic organization or a charity you could be a part of that doesn't have the word libertarian in it, you're going to meet non-libertarians, you're going to figure out how to communicate better with non-libertarians. Just a thought.
Chase, I'm intrigued by the idea of getting to a Congress that we might be able to persuade to restrict presidential power. And I'm trying to think through, my immediate thoughts are around how can we curb emergency powers? How can we take back statutory authority that Congress has given the president, like tariffs and things like that? All of these things are not easy to communicate to the average voter who doesn't live this stuff the way we do, but now we're asking them to go out and somehow persuade their congressman, who also doesn't necessarily have incentives because most of them are in safe districts. I like the idea, seeking some ideas and thoughts and help about, am I thinking about this the right way? And if I am, how do I effectively communicate it to the typical voter?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and you're right. One of the biggest crimes about emergency powers and giving power over to the executive is it's extremely hard to claw them back, absent getting a majority of Congress to support those things. Now, why do I think we have potential in this time around is because not only are we going to have midterm elections, but we're also going to have midterm primaries. And it's important to know who's going to be going on the ballot in those November elections. If you're living in the state of Kentucky, I would encourage you to cast a primary vote, even if it means, and some states are different. In Georgia, we have an open primary system. I don't have to change my registration to go vote for whoever I want. I voted for Tulsi Gabbard in the 2020 as an anti-war thing. Maybe that was kind of a dumb decision now. She's not as anti-war as she used to be. But I went and cast a vote in a primary because I wanted to shake some things up. Some states you can do that, and in fact, I would encourage libertarians to go find the Democrats that want to peel away presidential powers, and if you don't agree with them on everything else, screw it, you're voting for them in the primary anyways. It's not like they're going to get in office because of your vote. They're just going to get in office, or more likely in office, than a more terrible Democrat. Do it. Cause some chaos. But what I think we need to do is rally the people. And that involves telling stories. That involves finding these victims of what's going on and recognizing and being able to connect the story that the next victim could be you or me. When we are deporting a green card holder, a legal resident, for the things he's saying on a campus protest, that is very, very close to being able to remove citizens, right? Because they do have that same power. And that's the thing we need to communicate, is that what's happening to immigrants right now is very specifically being designed to happen to immigrants right now, because those are the people that divide the population as to what we need to do about immigrants. Oh, they're lawbreakers. Let me tell you right now, that is the one thing that bugs the crap out of me when I've heard about this is, well, they broke the law, so we should naturally deport them to a prison in El Salvador. Okay, well, it's against the law to smoke cannabis in the state of Georgia. If I'm smoking a joint, does that give the police officer the right to throw me into his car and then put me into a prison in El Salvador or anywhere else? I mean, there's laws, but are they just? And that's what we need to be looking at. Some of these emergency powers we've given the president to snatch people up, while legal, because they've been passed, are quite unjust. And we need to change the idea that legality equals justice, or that legality equals morality, because they don't. And that's the picture we have to get across to people when we want to peel away these powers. Is sure, legally he can do these things, but it's not just. And the only legal way to stop this, absent a revolution, which we should all not want, is for Congress to take that power back. So we have to demand those things. And you're right, it's a tough hill to climb. We might not get there. But I'll tell you when we won't get there, is if we don't even attempt to make the climb at all. And so we have to, when we see these abuses, call it out. And however imperfect our elected representatives can be, trust me, I live in the state of Georgia. I have Brian Kemp as a governor and Nikema Williams as a congressperson. Both are quite imperfect. But I have to trust that I'm going to fight and use their voice and hopefully pressure them to change things.
Chase, I want to thank you for many things. First of all, for the huge time commitment you spent on your presidential campaign. And second of all, continuing and prevailing, even though you didn't have the full support of some segments of the party, and the personal attacks that you endured, and throughout it all, being an extremely articulate spokesman for libertarianism and the Libertarian Party. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And the time commitment was about 2 years of my life. It started the day after I forced the runoff in that Georgia Senate election. I got a bunch of calls. And the first guy who said, hey, you should run for president, I really was like, man, if I could throw a brick at you right now, I would, because I just got done running for Senate. But after enough people called, we got, it took Steve Dosbach. He was the one who really, when he called me and he said, hi, I'm Steve Dosbach. I was Joe Jorgensen's campaign manager. I think you're the guy. I think you're the guy. And I was like, okay, now you're making me think I'm the guy. I don't know. But it was 2 years of commitment. I left my job. I used my life savings. I'll recoup it. I'll be fine. But it was a commitment. But it was the honor of my life. When I tell you, I'm not married, I don't have kids, so I can say that, right? Representing the party as its presidential candidate was the honor of my life. And it is a sacrifice that I would willingly make again, given even all the slings and arrows and all the BS that I had to deal with. If I could do it again one day, maybe not in 4 years, don't ask me, but who knows? I did tell somebody if I run in 20 years, I'm still younger than Kamala Harris. So I got time. But it's something I would be, that I was so honored to do, and that I think what we need to do is improve our party and not have these divisions. So no matter who our candidate is in 4 years or 8 years or how many years, they don't have to suffer those internal divisions. And I think one of the things that, the biggest thing that I want to get across as a party is one of the biggest attacks against me was my own personal, the way I live my life, being LGBT. What I want to say is we need to stop fighting culture wars as the Libertarian Party. We're an anti-war party. We oppose wars overseas. We oppose the war on immigration. We oppose the war on drugs. We oppose the war on businesses. Can we please oppose the culture war? Can we call for a culture war ceasefire? that would be great. So that's what I want to see. And so if I can do anything now that I am a presidential candidate emeritus, it will be to foster a better, more united Libertarian Party so our next candidate for president has an easier go of it. That would be my goal. But I thank you for the acknowledgement, and it was the honor of my life. And so thank you guys for having me as the candidate.
Thank you for being here, Chase, and I just want to say I so admire your communication skills, and I hope that we can get our candidates here in New Jersey to even have a fraction of your communication skills. I also have always admired your commitment to on-the-ground campaigning, door knocking, for your Senate campaign, but also when you ran for president, not only to get the nomination did you go to all 50 affiliates, but then when you were running a presidential campaign, you were going to all 50 states. Can you speak on how our candidates can implement some of those techniques, those grassroots efforts?
Yep, I absolutely can. And I can talk both as a candidate who's run nationwide, but also I've ran as a statewide candidate for U.S. Senate. And there are some definite best practices. First, you do need to be on the ground. You need to get a door knocking strategy. You're not going to be able to knock on every door, and this gets more and more important as you get more and more local. If you're running for a local race and you haven't knocked on every door in your district, you're not doing it right. Because you need to be able to be in contact with everybody. And you get 1 vote on average for every 8 doors you knock on. And so that is a valuable way in an afternoon to gain some votes, especially in a local election. And it was something that I committed. I knocked on thousands of doors when I ran for the Senate. I was lucky that I worked a remote job that was based in Washington State, so I was working West Coast hours, so I could wake up at 8 in the morning, eat a quick breakfast, go out and door knock for 2 hours, and get back before noon when I had to clock into work. So I was lucky. Not everybody has that luxury, but you do need to be out there as much as possible. One of the things I would advise for local candidates to do is also recognize that and this is for any candidate, you're just the name on the tin. You're the guy on the poster or the girl on the poster. You're not the whole campaign. You need a campaign manager who's going to be helping to run things for you. A trusted friend or an ally. If you're running a local campaign, your best friend is probably the person who's going to do it for you. But as you get higher up, you want to look to hire people who are very competent and know what they're doing, even if they're not your best friend. Because your campaign manager, his job is to run the operations of the campaign. And sometimes that does involve saying to you, you don't get to do this today. You have to do this. And let me tell you right now, as a candidate, you get real comfortable with going, but I'm the candidate. I should be able to say, no, you're not in full control of it. And you do have to recognize that as a candidate. You're not in full control of your own life or the political atmosphere. Things can change in a dime, and that takes me to my second most important point. After a campaign manager, you need a communications staff. You need somebody who's running your social media, who's writing press releases for you, and who's keeping you on message. Because otherwise it's very easy to get distracted. I have ADHD, so just in my regular life, I'm like walking around, oh, squirrel over here. And I completely get distracted. And if I didn't have my communications team basically helping us making a messaging calendar and doing those things and keeping me on track, I would have gotten lost with every new political story that popped up. I would have tried to and I would have gotten lost in the shuffle. And so the best thing that I can tell a local candidate is that you're not going to do this by yourself. And if you find yourself doing it by yourself, you need to really start reaching out and finding people, because you're going to drive yourself crazy if you try to do it all on your own. And if you recognize that you don't get to make all the decisions for yourself when you're the candidate anymore. And again, this happens more and more as you get higher up. A statewide candidate, I also encourage you to practice debate. Practice debate. Do mock debating. One of the things that helped me, I don't know if any of you saw me debate Senator Warnock when I was running for Senate. I got a one-on-one debate with a Democrat because the Republican refused to come there. And so I knew I'm going to have a one-on-one debate. And so I had 2 good political strategists, one from New York and one from Illinois, that I knew fly down and debate prep me. And how did they do that? They sat me up in front of a podium and started peppering me with questions, and they had a stopwatch. Minute and a half. I got 90 seconds to answer the question. And as soon as he would hit that stopwatch, next question was getting asked. I had no time between questions. Why? because that taught me to get peppered with questions over and over again. Make it fast-paced, make it fast-paced. Why? Because when I finally got to the debate, everything was slower. It calmed me down. There's a cartoon out there, some of the older folks might not know this, it's called Dragon Ball Z. The main character, Goku, he trains in a chamber that has many times of Earth's gravity. He works out and practices fighting in a place that has 50 or 100 times Earth's gravity. Why? Because then when he fights somebody on Earth, whoo, I'm light on my feet, ready to fight. That's what that kind of debate, that machine gun debate prep did for me, is it made me go, whew, this ain't that hard. That debate prep they were doing in my backyard was way harder than this. And so get a good group of people with you. Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself for these events, because the debate, if you get involved in a debate, and I say this to you, Vic, say this to anybody who's running for office in New Jersey, if you get invited to a debate, recognize that that's going to be the most visual thing that people see when they're voting for you, unless they already know you, or unless you have millions of dollars for ads, which, anybody in this room got millions of dollars for ads? Me neither.
Any other questions? There's got to be at least one. All right, I have one question.
Would you consider running a candidate training? Because I think you have probably some of the most experience that I've seen, and it would be very useful.
The short answer to that is yes, if we can find a time and a place that allows me to do that for a good group of people. I'm happy to host those kinds of things. We got a member of the convention oversight committee over here who will be helping to plan the Grand Rapids Commission. So I'm sure he would love to take any ideas of candidate trainings and things like that. I'd happy to be helping the party any way I can. But if a state wants to, at a future convention, host an actual breakout panel that's devoted to campaign training, I'm happy to do that. And I think it would be great to have myself and maybe one or two local candidates from that affiliate up there to talk about those issues. Absolutely, I think it's a great idea, and it'd be one I'd be willing to entertain. So the short answer to that is, yeah, let's do it.
Any questions? Local guys that just got elected to office, people that are about to run for office.
Well, that being said, thank you again for y'all having me. I know it's been a long day. I know some people are ready to go out and get some dinner, enjoy themselves, drive back home, But I just want to say thank you guys for having me. I didn't just come for the pork roll. That's the joke that I tell everybody when I come to New Jersey. I'm really, really thankful that your party has been one that has been so welcoming and inviting me to me. From last year's convention to the debate we had with it was myself, Rechtenwald, and Josh Smith. It's one of my favorite clips because I'll close with this. There was a time when in that debate, Josh knew when Rechtenwald started saying something that he knew, oh, Chase is about to go off on him. And I remember when I look at that clip, I see the look in Josh Smith's eyes. He starts smiling and goes, uh-oh, here comes Chase. Well, that was a moment that happened here in New Jersey. It's also, it's something, there's some fond memories I have here in the state. It's where I got to first meet Dave Smith. I told a joke, I made him laugh, which is good, I guess, for a comedian. If I made a comedian laugh, I felt like I did a good job. But thank you to New Jersey. Thank you to all of you for having me. And yeah, God bless.
Before everyone leaves, we do have one more event, and it's a debate between John Druding, I hope I'm pronouncing your names right, and Jason Howell. They're going to talk about what's going on in the Pine Barrens. If you want to stick around for that, that'll be happening in about 15 minutes. So if you want to go to the bathroom, take a break.
We'll make it a lot of fun, I promise.
Yeah. I know it's been a long day, but it'll be fun.
I'm moderating.
Turn it off for live.
box of money here.
Those microphones are off. I'm gonna go turn them on. Mic test, mic test. Test, test. This is mic 2. Gain. Turn the gain up just a little bit to 9. Test, test. Okay, this might be good. Test. Check. Check, 1, 2, 3. Check. Check, 1, 2, 3. Check, 1, 2, 3.
One or you together. So there will be a winner. But really, it's just getting the salt and getting you guys.
Test, test. Test.
Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few minutes, we're going to be opening this debate. So if you could make your way to the down house center. No one knows what the heck that means. That means be as close to my body as you possibly can be. Come on, sit in the front row here. Be intimate, be engaged. Let's have a nice conversation about the finals. Come on down.
Your microphone is off. Your microphone is off. The one you're wearing right now. Or do you want this one? Okay, never mind. So let me know when you're ready, because I have all the microphones muted.
So they're not going out live?
Actually, yours is.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you could please come to the center of the room, join us in the middle so we actually have some nice, intimate audience interaction. I'm just going to open up my nice bottled water right here. Filled with electrolytes. All right, so
Their mics are going to go live.
all right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the New Jersey Libertarian post-convention speaker process. Right now we have a debate on the Pinelands. and public use and access. And right now I'm going to ask the participants here to introduce themselves. We'll start with my right. Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. So my name is John Druding. I'm the president of Open Trails, and we are a group that advocates for maintaining responsible motorized recreation within Wharton State Forest.
All right, and yourself.
Yes, I'm Jason Howell, and I am the public lands advocate for Pinelands Preservation Alliance, but more importantly, I'm a Piney and a lover of our public lands in New Jersey.
All right, and we're going to be discussing today, these two gentlemen represent two different approaches to the Pinelands, the Pine Barrens, and preservation of public use, and how we go about as citizens accessing that. As libertarians, our relationship with our government and how we manage our public lands is incredibly important to us, and it's something that we think of about way too much. But we decided beforehand that you were going to go first, correct? So go ahead and start your introduction and your statements.
Yes, thank you, Dan. So the first and most important thing is to understand what the Pine Barrens is. So we have some people in the audience. Have you been to the Pine Barrens before? Okay. First question: Where have you been? Just shout out a place you've been in the Pines. Hogs Hat, great, local legend. Where's that? Graveling Point, even better, yeah.
Through them.
What's that?
Through them.
Yeah. Pasadena, excellent, yeah. Greenwood State Forest, wildlife management area. Any other locations? Has anybody been to Wharton State Forest?
Yep.
Great, so Wharton is really the key of the Pine Barrens. It's the keystone. It's the largest state park in New Jersey and the most important single piece of the Pine Barrens ecosystem. So what happens there really matters because it's integral to the whole. Wharton State Forest was purchased by the public in 1955, 56. It was purchased in 2 rounds from the Wharton estate. Joseph Wharton was a Philadelphia businessman, and he acquired those lands in order to sell water to Philadelphia. That was his intent and purpose. Secondary purpose was to use it as a private retreat. So that land was private up until 1955, 56. That's very important to understand. Then it was purchased by the public. It became public land owned by everyone, you and me. We all have a stake in it as New Jersey citizens. So we have rights on that land. And it's important to understand property rights. Now, I've researched this fairly thoroughly, and my understanding of property rights on public land is you have use, you have fruits, and you have alteration. There's 3 different right sets. Now, alteration really doesn't apply to public land unless under extreme circumstances, because if I alter the land, I am jeopardizing, I am impacting your rights. If you alter the land, you are impacting my rights. And there are other aspects, the fruits, that would be the deer, the trees, harvesting timber, harvesting animals. There may be others in certain circumstances, but it's very essential to understand those 3 property rights, that we have the right to use the land, certain rights to obtain fruits from the land, but we really don't have the right to abuse the land. Usus, fructus, and abusus. Those are Roman property law concepts, and they apply today, transferred through the ages, to our public trust doctrine in New Jersey.
What? And
All right, so like I said, John Druding, Open Trails. Our group got started back in 2015 when half of the roads within Wharton State Forest were suddenly closed without warning by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. And at that time, our group kind of formed up, and through public pressure, those roads were eventually reopened. And fast forward to today, we are now facing that same type of closure, actually to a greater degree than we had faced back in 2015. And so our group is back at it, trying to advocate for responsible access to Wharton State Forest. So Jason did a good job talking about how Wharton became public lands. But I want to go back actually maybe even a little further than that, right? So before Wharton sold the property, from the late 1700s until the mid 1850s or so, Most of the area that is Wharton State Forest was industrialized. There were multiple, towns, iron communities, and then later that turned into cranberry bog, operations, and then eventually became Wharton State Forest. At the time that it was, private land, that's when the road system within Wharton State Forest actually started to build up, right? A huge road network within Wharton State Forest. The other key point that I want to make related to this is that Wharton State Forest is absolutely enormous. It sounded like several of the people in the audience here are familiar with Wharton State Forest, have been there before. It's 125,000 acres. If you were to look at Google Maps on your phone and look at South Jersey, look at the standard map, the big dark green thing in the middle of South Jersey that takes up a very large part of South Jersey is Wharton State Forest. So I think that's going to become important when we talk later about access and getting to your...
Is that a map of the Wharton State Forest right there?
Yes. So this.
Mind holding it up real quick?
Sure. And this
And
is
then we'll get back to
You're not allowed to steal my dime now.
Then we'll keep on going with your thing.
I'm only
Yes,
kidding.
this is the map of Wharton State Forest as of 2025.
All right. So that's where we're talking about, guys. Yeah. Please continue.
Yep. So very large location, already a very established road network that existed within Wharton State Forest, depending on how you're counting, between 500 and 600 miles worth of roads. And then the last point that I wanted to make is, and as we heard in this group, there's already several people here who are familiar with it. It's a huge hub for recreation, right? From all over the state of New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, right? People come from everywhere to enjoy, Wharton State Forest, right? And so those things are all important. So as you can imagine, when the state took away essentially half of the access to Wharton State Forest, it had a major impact on those who are using the forest. And I just want to close with, I agree with what Jason was saying about the different breakdown of property rights, right, and abuse versus use. And one of the main points I want to make here is that my position is that we shouldn't be allowed to abuse Wharton State Forest, right? Drive into the woods or drive into the vernal ponds, but be able to use the existing road system that's already there and established within Wharton State Forest.
I'd like to ask some clarifying questions real fast.
Yep.
Now, we're talking about a property that is now state-owned, owned by the state of New Jersey on behalf of the citizens. And this is property that was at one time a personal estate of the Wharton family.
The bulk of it.
The bulk of it.
95,000 acres of 125.
Whole bunch of it.
Yeah.
And before it was an estate, it was individual private properties that had industrial towns, residents, I assume some farmland, and also had all these sort of roadways and connectivity happening and developing up. Is that correct?
In different portions, in different times, in different eras. It's a very complex history.
Very long
It's not a
history.
simple yes or no. Yeah.
And the roads that we're talking about, I assume they're all in different conditions and different types of road beds. We're not talking about 5-lane highways with elevated structures. We're talking about service level roads, service. Maybe could you describe the conditions of these roads so we have the right mindset when we're talking about these roads?
Yes, and it varies tremendously.
I can imagine.
So, and to clarify, there are roads are designed for public use, and there are ways, right? There are. So you got to consider that in the era of the industrial age, we think of industry, we think big industry.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, it wasn't quite like that. This was horse and buggy days, colonial days. So you're talking about horses.
We're not talking
right?
about 18-wheelers. We're talking about horses.
You're talking about horse and buggy, right? Primarily. But of course, that changed over the years. Now, the first map ever produced for Wharton State Forest is right here. So this is the first map ever produced. This was by the superintendent, Sidney Walker, the first superintendent of Wharton State Forest. It is...
That'd be in the 50s, 60s?
This was produced in 66, so it took them some years to kind of get things together. But this is essentially identical, with a few exceptions, to the 2025 map. It's just been updated for GIS, geographical standards, and EMS standards, which are critical. So what I would ask is, to John, where are the roads, as you describe them, on this map that should be on this map, on the new map, but are not?
Yeah, so I would say that that map is incomplete, right? It may be the first map that was produced for Wharton State Forest, but it's certainly not the most complete map for Wharton State Forest, right? So shortly after this, the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, came through the area in New Jersey and did a much more extensive mapping of Wharton State Forest. And when I talked about the 500 miles of roads, 500 to 600 miles of road earlier, that's actually what I was referring to. So if you can look at this map, sure, this is one example of one. But if you guys are familiar with exploring in the Pinelands, you might be familiar with the USGS maps. They're much more detailed, and they have a lot more roads. They were produced in the 50s and 60s, so they're contemporary with this map as well.
So I heard that line of argument, and I did some research. I called the USGS, and I communicated with Roger Barlow. He was their spatial analysis specialist. And what he said to me is, with regard to the USGS quads that were produced post to 1956, they were strictly photo revision. The original USGS maps were produced while the Wharton estate still owned the land. So they were mapping private ways that they identified through bicycles, on the ground, foot traffic, etc. They were not in any way related to the public land that was then established as Wharton State Forest. It's inapplicable to the discussion.
All right, so you said roads and ways as different things. And you said that access was restricted and then returned and then restricted again.
Yes.
So I want to put sort of like a bow around what that actually means for the audience that doesn't know the ins and outs. Specifically, what's the difference between a road and a way? And how would you describe the restriction of access that went away, that was put in place, went away, and then is now back in place? Let's start with you. Describe the, because we, mixing it up, roads and ways.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
So this is definitely going to be an area that Jason and I are going to disagree in. So from my perspective, a road is a trail. It could be a sand road. It could be a wider road that is documented on the U.S. Geological Survey map up through 2007 or 1997. And then further, the Pinelands Commission, which is another group that governs the Pinelands, in 2017, they passed a resolution that basically adopted that topographical map as the map of roads within Wharton State Forest. Right?
Okay.
So my definition would be any roads that are on that map, the USGS map, or what was passed by the Pinelands Commission, is a road in my book.
Okay, so a road in this case is any path that can be traversed by a vehicle. A way may be something more restricted to like a bicycle or a person.
Yeah, I would say so. Yes, a vehicle, and this is where we'll probably get into the details. On this, right? There are definitely different conditions of roads, no doubt about it, right? There's one in Wharton State Forest called Washington Turnpike, which is as wide as a highway, practically, right? Flat and level, throughout. There are roads that are much more challenging, right? That require like a four-wheel drive vehicle to navigate, narrow. They'll scrape the side of your car. It's called piney pinstripes if you're familiar with it in South Jersey. And there's those types of roads too. Neither one of them is more valid than the other as long as they're defined on those maps.
Okay, so the question definition there. Now, when he said that the access to roads were restricted a few years ago and then returned.
Let me clarify. So there's two maps that have ever been produced for Wharton State Forest for public use. For public use, that's the key. That's the key phrase.
And this was created by the Pinelands Commission?
No. It's important. I'll get into the Pinelands Commission. That's a complicated regulatory agency. It's not a state land management agency. And that's the key distinction. The New Jersey Park Service is the state land management agency that implements on-the-ground projects. They tell the public where to go, how to get there, and how to do it safely.
Well, not to jump in front of you, but when he says that the access to the roads was restricted, who did that?
So there were no roads restricted. Okay, so we're talking about we're talking about this map, the only map the Park Service ever released, that map was actually being implemented in force. Now, the government, you may know, is not always the most timely or skilled in implementing positive uses and decisions. It took them a long time to actually begin implementation of this map. So they let things happen they shouldn't have. So people were driving into wetlands, into endangered species habitat, into rivers, crossing and through the Mullica River, which is one of the cleanest rivers on the East Coast. And when you think about a river, it's actually our drinking water, because the river is the top of the Kirkwood-Cohansey Aquifer. So when someone drives through the Mullica River, they're driving through the water that I drank, my family drank, and that we have drank for generations, because my family actually worked in those mining towns, Martha, Furnace, and you think mining, you think digging a pit, but they were taking bog iron out of bogs, which formed naturally into a sediment, and then putting them into a furnace to purify the iron. That ended ages ago, but my family has a long history here, so I take it personally when people are damaging this public land that we all own, taking that abusus right, that right to alter, and stealing essentially our property, because we are all public landowners. So I encourage the land managers, who's Wharton State Forest, to actually implement the map that they had produced for 40 or 50 years.
Now, when you say implement, are you saying that the map that they had in place had roads indicated for vehicle access and roads indicated for personal access, human access?
Sure. So if you look at the original map, that was the 66 map, you have the dotted lines, and those are dirt roads, okay, dotted lines. The solid lines, those are paved roads, okay? And throughout there's also the Batona Trail, many hiking trails, horseback riding trails. There are canoeing and kayaking paths on the rivers. So there's a lot of user groups, and we have to balance the use. That's really the key. If you have 100 dirt bikes and quads going down the Batona Trail, that's a huge user conflict. So we have to separate these uses so that the rights of the public aren't violated, because while John may want to drive his Jeep in this place, that might be a hiking trail, that might be a horseback riding trail, that might be a picnic area, a astronomy field. So we need to separate these uses to not violate the rights of all the other citizens.
Okay, so it sounds like that this is a question of habitual use of the public of the land before the legal and regulatory state caught up.
I think that's clear, yeah.
Is that fair?
I don't know if it's totally fair, right? Because believe it or not, I actually agree with almost everything Jason said there, right? So
Okay.
the thing of, hey, I don't want to have people driving in the Mullica River, neither do I, right? I don't want people driving off the roads into the forest, neither do I. I don't want to see quads and dirt bikes and ATVs in the state forest. They're all illegal in Wharton State Forest today, and had been since probably the late 90s, early 2000s.
Well, fantastic. We got agreement. We can go home.
So I'm not advocating for that either, right? So what I'm actually advocating for is the use of the established roadway system within Wharton State Forest, right? Not
You're talking about the solid lines on this map.
So no, so I'm talking about I don't have my displays here with me. I didn't know we were bringing displays.
It's okay.
If I were bringing my display, I would have brought the USGS topographical map, right, that was produced by the U.S. government that shows 500 miles of roadway within Wharton State Forest.
John, can I ask you, what relationship does the USGS have to Wharton State Forest?
So it establishes where the roadways are. So
How does it establish that?
because the park code, right, says that motor vehicles must stick to established roadways within Wharton State Forest.
Does it reference the USGS?
That's actually the question is, if there's a requirement to establish roadways, and roadways now are mixing the roads and the ways and the whole thing, and these are things that have developed over centuries and have never been maintained. Now we're getting a state level regulatory agency and a federal level geological agency getting involved in the definition of a road. And we libertarians, we love my roads. It's a thing that we always are fascinated by. So the real question is going to be, you both don't want to ruin the land. Neither of you wants to see the forest damaged. This is what I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
You both want the public to have access.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. The question then becomes definitional of how much of the roads, quote unquote, are considered
Yeah.
to be roads for public
And
access.
I think-
Is that an accurate?
I think so. We should talk about numbers. We should talk about numbers because that helps clarify. So the most recent map, this is passed out at the Park Visitor Center, has over 190 miles of motorized routes, okay? That is a ton of motorized miles. And to put that in perspective, the U.S. Forest Service, their maintenance budget is they allocate $15,000 per mile. Now, John would have us open another 300 miles create 300 miles of road in the state forest. Well, what's
Not
that going
create, just
to, what's,
leave it open.
to designate, right?
You've
To
made an
designate.
assertion that you'd be creating. Is it creating or just
Well,
designating
you have-
as motorized?
Well, you have to keep in mind that, again, the condition of these paths vary significantly. So to open them up to the public, they have to be maintained for public use to a degree of safety. If there's no bridge, there has to be a bridge created. If there's giant ruts, those ruts have to be filled and graded. So if you're talking about adding 300 miles of motorized routes to this map, first off, there's going to be nothing but motorized routes on this map. You can see it's already covered in motorized routes. All those black lines are motorized routes. When I go to the park, I don't want to have cars driving by me all the time. I don't want to have that. I want to be able to go to where I'm going, get out, and do what I want to do there. Now to talk about the numbers, if you add 300 miles, well, that's $4.5 million. Who's going to pay for that?
Well, that's a question.
Yeah, so first of all, it wouldn't be adding 300 miles, right? It would just be continuing to allow the use that has been established and in use for 50 to 100 years, depending on the road.
This seems to be one of the big definitional questions. On your side of things, you're looking at habitual use of people that have been in the area, that are using it in a certain way. On your side of things, you're looking at the definitional use as it's been recorded and developed over history through the regulatory process. So that's one contention there.
That is one contention. And could I add one?
And who's going to pay for it? I'm talking about the maintenance cost, $4.5 million. Who's going to pay for that?
Well,
So let me answer that, and then
Go ahead.
one other aspect of what he was talking about. So one of the big concerns I have with this whole process is this definition topic, right? That's mostly what we've been talking about. It's obviously the difference. One of the big differences between.
well, words are important.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Words are important.
Yeah. So so the right now the map that he's talking about, the new map that it has come out this past year, has been solely defined by the DEP, right? So unelected, essentially bureaucrats within the DEP are making the decision for all of us of which roads you're allowed to go on and which roads you are not allowed to go on, right?
Would it be
So-
fair to say that they would be using historical data to do that?
Well, the historical data is the original map. This is the first and only map ever produced for Wharton State Forest until recently.
Okay.
It's the only one.
Except the USGS topographical.
But
map.
that was done by the U.S. Geological Service in the 1950s, not the New Jersey Park Service when it was actually public land.
Okay, go on.
So we're going to differ on the definitions of roads, right?
Yeah.
We could talk all day about his map versus my map.
Yeah, I don't think either of you are going to agree on using USGS or
Right.
New Jersey,
So
but go ahead.
But let me just answer his question about the money topic, right? So he had said, hey, who's going to maintain all these roads if we open them all up, right? And my response to that is we don't have to maintain all of these roads, right? All of these roads have not been maintained since, Wharton became owned by the state, right? The main thoroughfares, most of the ones that are on that map, have been maintained in some way, shape, or form, right? New Jersey is not the only state in the union, right? We're one of 50, and every state in the union, it seems like, except for New Jersey, has figured out how to handle this type of situation, right, where there are varying types of roads, right? The most common, if anybody's a skier here, one of the most common ways to designate it in other states is kind of like the way you do ski maps, right? So like green circle is the easiest, blue square is a little more difficult, black diamond is the hardest, right? So in other states that have state own land where there are varying conditions, they create maps that give you that indicator, right? So that you know, okay, if I'm driving my Prius, I can't go down this road, right? Because it's unmaintained, it's going to have big, ruts in it. Maybe it has a lot of sugar sand, et cetera. So it doesn't follow that having all 500 miles of roads open means that we now need to maintain continuously 500 miles of roads.
So John
But
brings
he
up
gave you
a
a
good point
specific
here.
estimate of $5 million. Is that a fair estimate of maintenance fees?
I don't know what the fees are for maintenance today. I don't.
Yeah, so if you have a public road, it has to be maintained. Even my own dirt driveway, I have to do maintenance on it. It's not negotiable. If you open something up to the public, it has to be open to the public. You can't say, well, if you destroy your vehicle, sorry, too bad, you're out of luck. It doesn't work. The state will get sued. That'll cost us more money. So what I'm hearing is John wants to provide a special interest group, which are off-road vehicle users, 300 miles of special access that costs the taxpayers over $5 million per year. That's not a one-time fee. That's $5 million per year in maintenance costs alone. That doesn't include bridges. Bridges cost money, millions of dollars. It also costs time in maintenance crew. In 2004, Wharton State Forest had 22 maintenance crew. Today, they have 8. They have 8 people to do maintenance. What he's talking about is totally, it can't happen, just to be nice.
All
It's
right,
not,
so-
it's not
It's happened
practical.
for 50 years.
Well, but first off, he's saying that you're operating for the specific interest of one special interest group, off-road vehicle users. Is that true?
No, absolutely not. So, I mean, you can look on our website if you want, right? We support all user groups, right? So we have a ton of support from hunters, kayakers, hikers, photographers, anybody that needs to use the forest to get to their, mode of recreation, right? They need to use a vehicle to get there. In 2025, in 125,000 acres, right? We got to remember the size of this. You need a motorized vehicle to get to some of these interior locations. And I'm sure one of the things he's going to argue is, well, we don't need all of those, right? And I guess the analogy I would use is, a tree requires branches, for the leaves, right? To be able to provide nourishment to the leaves, right? So, his argument might be, well, why can't, the
Try not
tree-
to classify his argument. Make yours.
Okay, so rather than just having a tree with a trunk, right? Well, why do you need all the branches? Well, you need all the branches to be able to deliver the nutrients, water, et cetera, to the leaves at their farthest point, right? Likewise, you need roads to be able to get access to the various recreations that people have.
Can either of you provide, because we're a suburban state, and the Pinelands are beautiful, but they're not exactly well populated. It's one of the least populated parts of the state. How big are the Pinelands? Not in acres, but if we wanted to drive across it, how long would that take?
It depends on the way you go. But just to
Roughly.
just to stay on topic, and I really want to focus on the money here because this is the practical aspect
Well,
of this
I'm asking that because his assertion is that we need the additional access to use the resources
Yeah.
that are available to the public.
I think I can clarify.
And the
So-
question is, if
Yeah.
he's right, is it a real inconvenience?
Yeah, so I'll clarify that. So Wharton State Forest, we're talking about Wharton specifically in this instance, is 125,000 acres. On the map that was released, you can never be more than 1.5 miles from a motorized route. That means, now I camped in Wharton last night. I was at Mullica Wilderness Camp. I walked 1.5 miles in 23 minutes. It really was not a burden to me to do that. So anywhere in the state forest, you can drive and be 23 minutes. And I'm not some like crazy hiker or something. I can go a couple miles. So for the average person, you can be there in 23 minutes of walking.
All right, so the branches seem to be taken care of, the leaves are being fed.
Well, so I guess I would say this is a point of view, right? Jason is a very spry, healthy young man right here.
It's generous.
Not everybody is as healthy and spry as Jason is, right? So, first of all, children would have trouble with some access area, right? The elderly, handicapped, and then if you're a hunter, I'm sure we have some hunters here, or maybe a kayaker, right? If you are a mile away from a road and you harvest a deer, how difficult is it going to be for you to carry that deer a mile back to your vehicle? Or if you're a kayaker, how difficult is it for you and your maybe 6-year-old child to drag their 40-pound kayak from the river's edge to their car?
If you got the access that you're asking for, the 500 miles, who would pay the $5 million? Assuming that number is good, we're just going to take that as
That's a number from the U.S. Forest Service.
we're just going to assume
maintenance
assume it's an accurate number.
per annum.
Assuming that number is accurate, who would pay that number?
So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not asking for the state to give me more access, right? All I'm saying is to continue to have the access that has existed since the state forest was established in the 50s, right? So it's not going to be an increase in cost for maintenance. It would be the same cost, best case scenario, that it's always been, right? Because I'm not saying that I want to pave all the roads in all of Wharton or get them all, graded, and whatnot.
Who pays for the bridges? If there's a bridge that goes out, who pays for that?
Probably the county, right? So most of the bridges in Wharton State Forest are on the black lines that you're talking about right there, right? So the county's going to pay for those bridges, whether or not we have the roads open that I'm talking.
The county doesn't have anything to do with state public land. It's the state's responsibility, managed by the State Park Service. So they're on the hook. It's their budget. Their budget has been cut over the years. And think about that what you may, but they went from a large amount of maintenance staff to a small amount of maintenance staff. In any scenario, you would have to raise funds to implement John's proposal.
Were they
already implemented, Jason.
Hold on. Were they previously maintaining these extra 300 miles?
Yes, they ran graders. Graders are machines that go along the dirt road. They have a blade, and an experienced operator can grade and maintain a dirt road. You can't have something that's designated open to the public and not invite the public to it. That's a violation of your rights. Say, well, only these people here with these specialized vehicles can do it. Sorry, too bad. By the way, thanks for your tax dollars. Now, there was a proposal by the Park Service to do more mileage, and they suggested, well, we could do a user fee. Now, I got introduced to user fees through the Ron Paul campaign in 2012. I was very interested in that proposal, and I thought, it makes sense. If you want to have special access, special features, well, why don't you pay for it? John's group and John opposed that proposal to actually pay for the access for the proposal that they're proposing. So they said, no, we won't pay for it, but we want you, the state, to implement it, raise money from the taxpayer, and implement our proposal.
Okay, if you got the returned use, so that extra 300 miles, they're asserting, or he is asserting, that you would need to run graders, you'd need to do maintenance in order to maintain the current level of access of that extra 300 miles. Is that you're saying, do you agree with that?
No, not at all. So I've been in the Pinelands since I was, a baby, a toddler. I have never in my life seen a grader on some of these roads that we're talking about, right? The main roads, the roads that are, the black lines that are on there, yeah, maybe they run graders on those. Graders are not being run on the roads farther into the...
If they were being run on those roads, would that change your opinion?
In what way?
Would you still stand on the idea of having that additional access to 300 miles if graders were required to maintain them?
I don't know how that could be affordable, right? I wouldn't advocate for that position, right? It wouldn't be necessary for that to be done. It's never been necessary for that to be done. So I don't understand why maintaining the same level of access that we've had for 50 years would now suddenly in 2025 require us to run graders on these 300 miles of roads that have never been done for.
Yeah,
Okay.
So I think it's a bit of a fantasy to suggest that anything the government does won't cost money. Okay, I think as libertarians, you probably understand that. If you have a proposal before the government to open up 300 miles of roads, that's significant. The county isn't going to pay for it. Who's going to pay for it? The taxpayer is going to pay for it, if that were to happen.
Okay.
Except that we're not talking about opening the roads, right? We're talking about maintaining the access that already existed. Right?
Well, this exists, right? This is the current map. If the state was to say, okay, we need to do another map with 300 miles of road on it, well, they have to pay their GIS experts. They have to pay their public safety experts, Forest Fire Service to do an analysis. New Jersey State Park Police, can they get to where they need to go to do their job? There has to be EMS access. If you have an injury, the ambulance has to be able to get to you, or else, again, you're facing a lawsuit, which would cost the taxpayer unknown millions of dollars to then pay for that person who is injured on these unmaintained, unmanaged paths that John's suggesting the government and us, we pay for.
Is there no place in this plan, in this situation, for wilding of the park?
Could you
Wilding,
clarify
wilding meaning in some national parks, yes, you have access, but you don't have like access. The park is basically reserved for wild nature. Would it be a possibility for these roadways, well, not even roadways, pathways, access ways, to simply be returned to wild nature, and if people use them, fine, but it's at their own risk?
So that is essentially what we have now.
Right now. That's what that's the status quo.
The challenge is the motorized use. Now, you can walk wherever, but when you take a motor vehicle, that comes with certain liability risk to the state, because if you designate it as open to motor vehicles, well, there's a certain expectation of use that is then established, and then you're on the hook. That means we, the taxpayers, are on the hook.
No,
So let's
I think we just hit on a key point here. If the state says, yeah, this pathway here on the map, this pathway here, you can go ahead and drive a car on it. Suddenly, they're responsible legally
Yes.
for maintenance of that pathway for the vehicle, making sure it's safe for that vehicle to pass.
That's 100%.
Is that a fair?
I'm not sure that they're taking on any more liability than they have always had, right? Like I said, these roads have been open for all of this time, right? So if there were really, a lawsuit to be had, I would have thought it would have been, brought before now, right? And I do want to touch on one aspect of this I think you're getting at, right? So one of the things that the state has said that, is the reason for this map is along the lines of what Jason is talking about, right? So, safety and enforcement, right? So, hey, we don't want people going out in the woods and, driving their Prius in the place that they don't belong and get stuck and then need to be rescued by fire rescue or potentially stay out there overnight or whatnot. Or we don't want the hooligans tearing up the woods or the wetlands. So, we wanted to find out, like, okay, well, what's the basis of that assertion that they're making that, this problem actually exists? So we opened all of the calls for help out of Wharton State Forest, as well as all of the citations that were written in 2023 within Wharton State Forest. Within 800,000 visitors visited Wharton State Forest in 2023. Of those, there were 110 calls for either stuck or disabled vehicles. So I don't have the math off the top of my head. Insignificant number. Likewise, on the enforcement side, there were 7 tickets written for basically road-related violations within Wharton State Forest, right? Going off of a road. So if you're going to make an argument that this minimal roadways are required for either safety or for enforcement reasons, the data that would back up the need for that certainly is not shown in the data that we've got.
I'm glad you brought up enforcement, because who is currently enforcing access right now? When I go off and I use my vehicle on the wrong pathway,
Right.
who comes up with flashing lights and gives me a ticket or puts me
Well,
in handcuffs?
State Park Police.
So the State Park Police has been under personneled for maybe a decade or more. Now, I don't think we need that many police in the forest if we have good management. And good management starts with a map so people understand where they're going and how to get there and what to do when they're there. If they don't understand and they get stuck, like those 110 people that actually called for help and assistance, well, there are only 2 park police on duty at any given time in 125,000 acres. That takes, first off, they have to find where those people are. If there's no map, how do you even know where they are? Are there no road names? How do you know where they are? So there has to be a map, it has to be designated, and then, it has to be maintained, taken care of, and EMS has to be able to get there. And if EMS can't get there, you can't say it's open to the public.
Okay.
And this map was the maintenance plan. This is what they took care of in the 60s. It's almost identical to the map produced today. And the challenge that John is really making here is, well, we don't think you should actually enforce the map that you're maintaining. You should just leave it unenforced and, have anarchy. But like we discussed earlier, when you have anarchy, you jeopardize the rights of all the other property owners and you cost everybody money.
Okay.
And again, I'm going to violently agree with you there, Jason, right? Because I'm not actually advocating for anarchy, and I'm actually also advocating for enforcing, a map that exists and shows where the roads are within Wharton State Forest. The difference is, which map are we talking about, right? And I think that's a key point here, and one of our concerns, right? So I mean, he keeps on holding up that map from whatever date it is, and I could hold up the map from 2017 that the Pinelands Commission passed that has 500 miles of roads. Mine's more recent than his. We could argue that mine is more valid, but that's also not necessarily the point, right? I think the point is that the people are not deciding who actually what roads are open or not. It's the DEP, unelected bureaucrats that are deciding which of those roads are passable or not.
Now we got three organizations involved. We got the Wharton State Forest Park Service, we have the Department of Environmental Protection, and we have the Pinelands Commission.
Yeah.
So if a little bit of background for other viewers who may not be familiar, how do these
It's important to
interact?
understand that the Pinelands Commission is a regulatory agency, not a land management agency. So what they do is they basically set, here's the rules that you can follow. So if you want to build a house in the Pinelands, okay, there's a certain rule set, because what the Pinelands Commission was a creation of an agency that essentially a zoning agency. They aren't the park agency. Okay, so they're saying, well, you could do something here, here, and here. That's what the Pinelands Commission map is a zoning map. It's not a management map. The Park Service is the only agency, not the USGS, not the Pinelands Commission. The New Jersey Park Service is the only agency responsible for public state parks in New Jersey. That's it. Simple. It's that simple.
They're responsible for maintenance and operation.
Maintenance and operations.
All right.
And enforcement.
Who's responsible for deciding where the roads are?
The New Jersey State Park Service.
Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yep.
So why does the Pinelands Commission map oversee the map that they're creating?
So I mean, I do think the Pinelands Commission does have some purview in this area, right? I mean, they went through a whole process for months. Jason and I attended the meetings way back then. If they didn't think they had any authority over the matter whatsoever, why would they go through the trouble of putting together this map, passing the resolution and whatnot, right? So I do think they do have some authority in there, and the DEP can debate with them, right? They can butt heads about what authority they have and what authority they don't have, and that's fine. The concern that I have, which I agree, is that the DEP at the moment solely controls what that final analysis is going to be, of those roles, of those roads. And why that concerns me is that there's no public input to that process. Right?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of public input. There's been 2 years of surveys and meetings and public information sessions. What I want to point to with the Pinelands Commission, I was the one that advocated for the Pinelands Commission to do that. I had a grassroots group. We went to the Pinelands Commission every month.
It didn't mean anything, though. He said it didn't mean anything.
Well, no. It does have it did have a purpose, and I'll get to that. What the Pinelands Commission is essentially a zoning agency. What I wanted to do was give the New Jersey State Park Service flexibility for the public in where they designated roads or other trails. The Pinelands Commission can give that flexibility. It can't tell them to do X, Y, or Z. It can only give them the broad overlay, just like the zoning in your town or city. It's really that simple. So that's why I advocated for the Pinelands Commission to produce that zoning map of the forest so that the Park Service could then go ahead and have some flexibility so that if there is a trail, if there is a river access point, they wouldn't be precluded by the Pinelands Commission from doing so. I want to get to one more point.
Sure.
I went on
Sure.
Open Trails website and I went to their position on the Pinelands Commission map. And what they said is, we don't think the Pinelands Commission should tell the DEP what to do. So John's contradicting what he said in his position on his website.
Well, from my perspective, and I'm going to speak as the libertarian in the room here, because why not? You guys really don't want anarchy? Come on. Anyway, it sounds like you guys are arguing over at some level, which board of unelected bureaucrats gets to decide what the public can and cannot do on this public land?
I wouldn't frame it like that. No, the Park Service, they're professional land managers who have on-the-ground, day-to-day experience. They are the most informed people to make these decisions.
So that would be your group.
By law, with public input. It has to be considered. And they got public input. So I think the process was followed in a democratic and just and fair way.
So my argument, which I guess.
You got a question? We just lost the feed.
Okay.
We lost the battery in that, and I don't have a way of getting it back. I can keep recording with this camera. I'm not sure how the audio is, but.
All right, so we've lost the live feed, but we're recording.
Yes.
We're going to keep going.
All right. So my argument, which this audience would probably appreciate, is that I don't think it should be solely in the hands of.
One moment. By the way, think of questions. We're going to go to the audience for some questions.
So I don't think it should solely be in the hands of the elected bureaucrats, right? So there's some discussions going on right now. There actually was a bill proposed in Congress, the state legislature, to create maps for all of the state parks and state forests within New Jersey, right? So one of the things that I've been talking to the legislatures about is, hey, is there a possibility where if we're going to legislate that they need to create a map, that the local legislator whose district has that state forest or park could approve the map, right? So that way, at least elected officials have a stake in saying what roads are.
Well, you're saying one elected official, is that correct? One single elected official?
At least.
So I mean, at a minimum, I would say it should be the elected officials where that state forest or park resides.
What
I
district?
would have no problem with if the entire legislature voted on it as well, as long as there's somebody elected who is involved in the process of.
One would assume that in the case of Wharton State Forest, which our discussion seems to be floating around, it would have to be multiple.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily against the entire legislature voting for it, right? But if he wants only one or two elected officials, well, now you're disenfranchising all you people who don't live in that district. And guess what? You pay the taxes. Actually, you pay the bulk of the taxes because the bulk of the tax dollars does not come from the district right around Wharton State Forest. It's coming from the rest of New Jersey.
I did want to ask about how the economic effects of, well, first off, let's define what your win would be. Your win would be having these full 500 miles open for access, as it has been in the past before the shutdown occurred. Your win would be returning to the use map as defined on these maps that you have.
I'm satisfied with the status quo. I think the map that was produced by the Park Service gives me everywhere I need to go conveniently by motor vehicle.
So that would be your ideal,
Yeah.
or at least close to your ideal. Your ideal would be reopening as much as possible, as reasonable.
Establishing this status quo that existed up until 2024.
Okay. We're going to go to some questions. I think there's a few in the audience that might have some questions. Any questions in the audience to ask? I thought I saw a hand. You? Okay.
It's a lot. It's a
I
lot.
thought I saw a hand up. I'm sorry, guys.
It's a lot of nuance.
In that case, I just want to ask, so we talked about tax money, we talked about costs and fees and access ways, and the fact that
It's a key point.
It's going, oh, we actually have one, go ahead.
How do you
define an off-road vehicle?
That would be a good question.
I can go first on that. The most important point is that it's operated off of an established roadway. So you can have a vehicle that is not designed for off-road use and use it off of an established roadway. But there are certain vehicles specifically designed or manufactured or altered for using off of an established road. So that could be a modified Jeep, modified truck, ATV, dirt bike, dune buggy, side by side. There's a million of these things. So it's a broad-based term to encompass all those, differences between vehicles.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with most of what he said, except I'm going to put even more of a box around it than I think he did, right? So I think that the box that I would put around that is that it's got to be Title 39 compliant, right? So legal to drive on a paved road, within New Jersey, right? So, headlights, tail lights, turn signals, They do a tip test if it's a, a truck that's been elevated, right? So the access that I'm talking about, the vehicle must be licensed, insured, registered in the state of New Jersey.
And for the access that you're talking about for hunters, kayakers, campers, it's not the imagined use in your mind would be they drive to the point of use, they disembark, they use, they re-embark, and they leave. And your concern is that with that additional traffic, the additional roadways that are open and need to be maintained would be $5 million, would be exorbitant for the
absolutely, the cost is exorbitant, and there isn't the maintenance staff.
Well, what aside from the cost, because you haven't really brought up any
well, the other aspect is, and I did bring it up a little bit, it impacts the use of other users, right? So you're taking certain rights away from other users by saying, well, you can just drive over the entire state forest over hundreds and hundreds of miles, and now there's not enough hiking trails. Now there's not enough horseback riding trails. It becomes dangerous for people because these vehicles are operated at unsafe speeds. They're operated at unsafe manners, and the culture really is one of an outlaw culture. They market these things as shredding, tearing. It's not. It's not something really compatible. It's not really something that's compatible with public land in New Jersey because we're a small state. This isn't Montana. This
You're
isn't
describing 4x4s and motorbikes.
Off-road vehicles, yes.
Right, but it could be a truck like my Ranger.
It could be.
It depends on the manner of use. For instance, a truck is just a tool, but if you use it in a manner that's aggressive, dangerous, or impacts people, then it's something else.
And again, I would agree with Jason on that, right? Because I'm not talking about illegal use, right? So I'm not talking about deliberately tearing up the roads, right? Or going off the roads, or driving recklessly, or speeding, or all those things, right? I'm talking about using the vehicle according to the speed limit, according to Title 39, requirements and regulations, not driving recklessly and whatnot, right? So it doesn't follow that just because people can do that means that we need to close down, roads within the forest, right?
In order to safeguard the public lands from what you said, the reduction of the ability for people to use it, would you require additional enforcement by the park police?
So I think that probably both of us would want additional enforcement within the state forest. Right?
So both of you need additional funding for park police.
I'm not asking for that. I think the park police should be supported, but I think sound maintenance and management decisions can actually go a long way. And that's why the production of a map that people can actually understand and
what's the consequence for going off the map?
Well, there are various fines for going off-road.
Are we talking $5 million or $50?
No. You're talking about first offense, $250.
Okay.
So I did want to finish just tie off on one point that he made, right? So he talked about one user group interfering with the other, right? Which I don't want that either, right? When I go out in the
well, it's inevitable when two people are in one place trying to use the same thing, conflict will occur. That's inevitable.
It will, except the fact that we're talking about 125,000 acres, right? So when I go out there on the roads that I've always been.
No one knows how big an acre is. Give us a relatable.
So I might be able to do it. So has anybody been to Acadia National Park, or have you been to Shenandoah?
So it's the 25.
Shenandoah National Park.
All right, which town nearby would it be close in size to?
Oh, it's bigger than any town.
Bigger than any town in all of the years.
No, we're talking about county level size.
Probably Manhattan size practically.
Okay.
So
Island of Manhattan.
Not quite that, but
9 miles by 2.
we're talking about probably one of the smallest counties in New Jersey. Probably.
Okay, so small county.
Yeah.
Incredibly large, mega city. Small county. Okay, now we got it. Go ahead.
So I did want to hit with one factor. Right? So I totally agree. If we're side by side, I'm fishing, and this person is driving the vehicle, right? We could potentially interfere with one another. 125,000 acres. We just talked about the size of that, right? The entire surface of the roadways, added all together, right, of the map that I'm advocating for, the map that we've had for 50 years, is 0.4% of the total area of Florida State Forest, right? So,
but that's not really the point of the road. The point of the road is not how much it's covered unless you're in LA and it's all paved over like that. It's how you get to the place, right?
So
the point of a road is not how much pavement it has, and not how much cover it has, not how much surface area it's covering, but where it takes you to.
Yes.
Okay. With the map that he has here, he's asserted you drive to it on the roads that are solid and established for vehicles. You walk 20 minutes. Might be a difficulty for someone that's older or has a bad leg or is a child, but you can still make it. Is that real? Is that true?
You can still make it if you are, a healthy individual, right, who doesn't have little children in tow and carrying kayaks, or a hunter who just had a 100-pound harvest that they need to be driving out. So yeah, you can make it. Yes, absolutely, you can make it.
I want to switch to economic impact of the area. It's hard to tell. And last time I checked, there's no freaking crystal ball that anyone can look into this. But what's the economic impact of using this map as it currently is? And similarly, what would be the economic impact on surrounding areas of returning to what it was before they started enforcing this map?
I think the most important point is actually to have a map, right? Because folks around here who live around here don't have any idea where we're talking about.
Well, he would say that the USGS service provides it.
They don't. They do not. No. So not currently. Now you're talking about something from the 1950s. They do not currently provide a map of Oregon State Forest. It's not correct. It's an incorrect statement. The only map provided specifically for Oregon State Forest is this map on the table. The Oregon State Forest. Well, this is the current map.
Which is substantially similar to the one.
Very substantially similar. Yeah, a couple of things. Yeah, no, there's only one map. So the most important thing economically for the surrounding towns is that there be a map so people can confidently come, experience the place, and then go to the towns like Hamilton, Chemung, Tabernacle, and use their money to fund local businesses. I mean, that's the most important point.
It's a straw man argument, right? So I'm not saying there shouldn't be a map, right? I'm saying there should be.
I didn't allege that, John. I'm just saying the most important thing for economic use is that there actually is a map so people know how to get there and what to do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, right? And I think that the difference is if you are constraining the use, right? You are turning people probably off from use and away from the area, and thereby reducing the economic.
So John's alleging a constrainment of use, but we're talking about actually expanding use, designating more hiking trails, biking trails, horseback riding trails for more user groups as to not preclude the use and to detract from the value of the land for people visiting.
All right, so with these expansions of different modes of use and designations of trails for different modes of use, does that fall on what you're talking about, or what you're talking about with returning to what was before, the 500 miles for access? Would that prevent people from using them for horses, using them for hiking? Horses are skittish, they scare easy, they can bolt. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, so I mean, I would love to see increased use of the forest, right? And I guess what I've been trying to convey here is that there's enough room for everybody, right? The existing road system, as it stands today, the 500 miles, 0.4% of the total area of Oregon State Forest. There's enough room for the horses, for hikers, for hunters, for everybody at this point, and then some. Right? I mean, I drive around today in Oregon, I'm sure Jason would as well, and not see a soul, right, for hours and hours and hours in the current state as it is today, right? So it's really not like we're talking about the turnpike here or the Atlantic City Expressway on Saturday, right? It's very sparsely populated as it is. Okay.
All right. So, is there any? We should be wrapping up. We're around 55 minutes. Is there any point that either of you have not been able to make during this discussion?
I think just to wrap it up is that the current solution on the table, which is essentially the same solution that the first superintendent of Oregon State Forest ever produced, it's the same. It achieves the goal of balancing recreational use and protecting the rights of other users. It achieves that at a minimal cost and at a rate that everybody generally finds acceptable, except for a narrow segment of motorized users who want extreme off-road vehicle use in most cases. Some hunters that were unhappy about their specific little sites being violated by not being able to get there by vehicles. But in essence, I think this map currently achieves the goal of balancing public use and protecting the rights of all our citizens at a minimal cost.
That's your position?
Yeah.
All right. And go ahead.
So my position, and we haven't talked about this a lot, is I don't think that this is what the people want, right? Jason talked a little bit about the public engagement process. The map from 2015, which had no public engagement process and was withdrawn due to public pressure, and the map that was produced in 2024 after the supposed public engagement process is essentially identical, right? So all this engagement that was supposedly had no influence on the final result. And when that draft came out, 11 municipalities within the Pinelands region, multiple assemblymen and senators in the 8th and 4th and 2nd district came out vocally opposed to the map, and the DEP has not compromised in any way, shape, or form, right, since that release. So in terms of what the people of New Jersey want, it's not this, right? And what I want is a map that is defined by elected officials and the people of New Jersey, not the unelected people.
Okay, and that's your position. All right, so we're going to turn to the audience now and ask, does anyone have any clarifying questions or really good insults they want to throw at people? Go ahead. We got a microphone over here. State your name and make sure that it's a question. It's got a question mark at the end.
Yes. Okay. My name is Dustin. I have a question about controlled access with the limited access that we have now. Knowing the size of the park and how difficult it is to catch some of these abusive users, what solution could there be to fix this if they can't really be stopped?
Fix the abusive users.
Right. What can we do about the abusive users, knowing that law enforcement or park staff or anything like that, or forest staff or anything like that, being able to catch them? What could ever be done about that with such a large land area?
Okay.
And
Who would like to answer?
Control entry.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've actually had a lot of success in doing just that. One is really the most important one is having enforceable routes, right? So those are routes that are maintained so that, park police vehicles and EMS vehicles, they're not these specially equipped off-road vehicles. They can't go through rivers and lakes and stuff like that, right? So if you have something that's designated as open and that people can just drive into and then get away from the enforcement and the emergency access, well, obviously you can't enforce that, right? But if you have a map with enforceable routes that are maintained that park police can actually utilize, well, now you have roads that can actually be patrolled and then protected. That's really, I think, the most important point there. But there are other things. There are cultural issues, right? And promoting and educating people about responsible use, okay, and saying like, this is what you can do here. This is how to do it safely and responsibly and not impact all the other users. So that's a big part of that. And a map actually helps do that because it's a statement. This is where you can drive, and this is where you can't. So to me, we're on the right path here. It's just a matter of achieving better implementation over time.
Right, so I think our answers are virtually identical on that topic. The other thing I'll add, I think is maybe a little bit different to what Jason just said, is that our group has advocated for protection projects that would protect some of those sensitive resources that don't inhibit access to and via the roads, right? So instead of closing all the roads that get to a location, protect the location itself with barriers or bollards or what have you. We had a lot of success with doing that. This organization had a lot of success with doing that. I think
And in certain places that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm disagreeing with you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I think that's a key point. I agree that education is also a key point, right? We have to make sure that people are aware that if people destroy this resource, then it's not going to be available for all of us in the future. So I think the state organizations like ours need to step up and do more communication like that. And then the only thing that's different that I differ with, I think, with Jason on the map is obviously which roads we're talking about specifically. But I do think the state needs to look at what other states are doing in this area in terms of how they designate these routes, right? Because they're not all created equal. There should be some sort of system that says, hey, this is a green circle that anybody can go to in any sort of vehicle. This one requires four-wheel drive or some sort of more capable vehicle to
Foot only, bike path.
four-wheel drive required. Don't go on this unless you can go up a 12 degree grade, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
And that's probably, and you would ask for that to go through a legislative process, a representative influence process, as opposed to what you feel has happened, which is a sort of regulatory bureaucratic review process. Is that fair?
I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but the process is the point, right? There has to be a process, and it depends on where. You're not going to be able to do that through endangered species habitat. You're not going to be able to do that through my favorite hunting locations, right? So depending on where he's talking about, that might be okay, or maybe that's cutting off access for certain people that do other things. So there has to be still a public process. Now, the Park Service already did this, so that would be another, X number of dollars, right? So I'll go back again. If you want that, why don't you pay for it? Why don't you use user fees for permits to actually do that use that you're, suggesting the rest of us pay for?
And last thoughts?
So I'll answer that question real quick, and then we can move on. So the primary reason we are opposed to fees is because New Jersey can't be trusted with it. Right? And if you look at Island Beach State Park, for example, if anybody's a fan of that, you'll understand what the concern is. Right? I don't know what that fee started out as when the Island Beach State Park was established, but now it is hundreds of dollars, and you line up and maybe can't get access to the park. That's our concern. Our concern is New Jersey can't properly manage that.
All right.
Then who pays for it? That's the question. Who then pays for it?
That's always the magic question. So we just went over an hour. We had a couple of questions from the audience. We're going to go ahead and ask the audience here to really consider the arguments that you've heard today, and then we're going to ask you to vote. All right. So if you can say your position in one clean sentence.
Yeah, it's protecting the rights of all users to responsibly utilize the land that they own in a way that can be sustained for generations to come.
By using
the current existing roadmap rules that covers.
Okay, and your position would be?
My position is that people should have the same responsible motorized Title 39 access that they have today and the already established topographical maps of York State Forest.
All right, so anyone here who agrees with position A, please raise your hand. All right, all who agree with position B, please raise your hands. It is a slim victory.
Sam, did you get the vote?
No, I didn't.
It's still slim, so it's still a slim victory for this side, but it is a slim victory. So I think you guys have a lot of work to do together, but I think that it is work because of how much you guys agree with each other on using the map.
What was the vote count then?
It was 3-4. It was 3-4 because we've had some people who go off for dinner, of course, during the course. But I think what the real point is that most of the time you guys have spent agreeing with each other. That you want this land to be useful. You want this.
We have much in common.
You have a whole lot in common. The question now becomes, if changes happen to what the current status quo is, how does it go about doing it? And I look forward to hearing about that and getting along the process and seeing how it works out. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.
John, actually, yeah. Let's do it. Thanks, Dan.
Are we clear?
You're clear. We're still streaming now, but I will.
So I hope that was useful to you guys.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
I was trying to stay close to the questions as much as I could. Conversation was all. I was trying to be as serious as I
Jason, I had
That wasn't one of the options.
The question is,
I mean, it's like talking about.
Oh, yeah.